Muito boa tarde a
Good
todos
afternoon
e a todas.
to all of you.
Nós vamos aguardar ainda alguns minutos
We'll still
até
have a few
o
minutes
evento em
before
si começar,
the kickoff of
para
the
dar
event
oportunidade às
so that
pessoas de entrar
everybody can have the opportunity to
na
join
sessão.
the session.
Mostramos aqui desde já uma
We can show
imagem
you
da Renza, que é a
an
região
image of
episcopal
the
Nossa
Reset.
Senhora do Rosário, que todos
That's
os
where
anos
the region
organiza,
of
juntamente
the
com outras
Rosary,
organizações locais,
the region
uma romaria
Diocese
pela
of Nossa
ecologia
Senhora,
integral
and
Brumadinho,
they have a
e com isso combino também o
and
convite de
with this
participarem
I
das
invite you
atividades
to
da
participate in the
Renzer na próxima
activities
semana.
of Renzer in the
Então, convite
following
desde
weeks.
já às pessoas
So
que estão
this
no
is an
Brasil, que nos estão
invitation for
ouvindo,
those who are
que
in
existe a
Brazil,
oportunidade de participar
that there
nestas
is the
atividades.
opportunity to participate in those activities.
Ok, estou vendo que
I
estão entrando
see
cada vez mais
that
pessoas,
more people are
e
joining in,
então eu vou
and
lentamente dar
I
início
will slowly but
ao
surely
nosso evento.
start our event.
Então, mais uma vez,
Once
muito boa
more,
tarde.
good
Sejam
afternoon.
todos e todas muito
All of
bem-vindos e
you are
bem-vindas. O
welcome.
meu nome é Madalena
My name
Ramos
is
Gana.
Madalena Ramos
Acompanho
Gana.
os
I
projetos no sul e sudeste do
am
Brasil da
responsible for
Miséria
the
e sou
projects of
moderadora
Miseor
do
in Brazil
evento
in
de
the south
hoje, que
and
terá uma
southeast, and
duração de cerca
I'm the
de 90
moderator of
minutos
the event
e para
with
o qual
about
contamos com uma tradução simultânea.
90
Portanto,
minutes
os
with
participantes poderão
simultaneous
optar
interpretation.
por seguir o
The
evento em
participants can
português ou
follow
em
the
inglês, e
event
para
in
isso basta
Portuguese or in
selecionar a
English.
língua
All you
que
have to do is you
pretende,
have to select the
clicando
language
no pequeno globo,
by clicking
o
on the
símbolo que se
globe.
encontra embaixo
It's
à
at the
direita.
bottom on the right-hand side.
Espero que
I hope
todos e todas
that
consigam
all of
identificar
you
e
can
escolher a sua
identify
língua.
the language you want to
Então, o
hear.
nosso evento é fruto de
Our
uma
event
cooperação de
is as a
várias
result of
organizações da
cooperation of
sociedade civil
several
brasileiras e europeias.
players of the
Ele
social
foi
society in Brazil,
organizado
in
pela
Europe,
Avabrum, que é a
organized by
Associação dos
Azadrum.
Familiares de Vítimas e
With his
Atingidos da
Avabrum
Tragédia de
is
Rompimento da
the
Barragem de
association
Brumadinho,
of the victims and people
pela
affected
Renzer,
by
que é a
the
região episcopal Nossa Senhora
burst
do
in the dam of
Rosário,
Amazon, and by the
pela CITSE,
Henzer,
que é a
that's Our
Cooperação
Lady of
Internacional para o
Rosary.
Desenvolvimento e Solidariedade,
SITSE, that's
o
International Cooperation for
ECCHR,
Development
European Center
Solidarity.
for Constitutional and Human Rights, e pela Miséria. A
ECCHR
intenção
and
do nosso evento é
Miseria. The
reforçar a
intention is to
visibilidade dos
reinforce
impactos do rompimento
the
da barragem
visibility of what
ocorrido na
happened after
região
the
em
burst of the
Brumadinho,
dam
no
in
dia 25
Brumadinho
de
on the
janeiro de
25th of
2019.
January
A próxima
2019.
quarta-feira marca o
Next
quarto
Wednesday will
ano
be the
deste
4th
crime
anniversary of
e
this
nós
crime,
realmente fazemos questão de
and
usar a
we
palavra
really
crime,
want to say
uma
the
vez
word
que não
crime
se tratou de um
because
mero acidente,
it was not a
mas sim
mere
de uma
accident,
tragédia
but a
anunciada.
tragedy
Foi,
that
de
had
facto,
been in the
uma
making,
série de alertas
because
que
there were
simplesmente
several
foram ignorados
warning signs
pela
that have
Vale,
been
que
ignored by
é a
Vale,
empresa que operava a mina.
which is the
E a
mining
estabilidade da
company,
barragem B1 que
and
rompeu
the stability of
foi
the
atestada pela empresa certificadora alemã
B1
Sud. E
had
este é um
a
dos motivos
certification received
pelo
by
qual este
TÜV
caso também
Süd,
tem
and
uma
that's
dimensão
why
internacional,
this
sendo usado
has an
como
international
exemplo
dimension,
emblemático no trabalho
and
de
this is a very
política em torno
emblematic
de
in the work.
diretivas vinculativas
There
para
are
garantir
many
a devida diligência
directive
nas cadeias globais de
about
abastecimento
the
de empresas.
investment, the
E para nós
investigations in
termos
the
uma ideia
process.
mais concreta
We
do
have a
que
more
foi
concrete
este crime de
idea
2019,
that was in
nós vamos mostrar brevemente um
2019.
vídeo
We will
disponibilizado pela
show a
Renzer
video
que
that
mostra
Renzer
o
made
momento
available,
exato
and
do
that will
rompimento da
show the
barragem
exact moment
às
the dam burst
12h28
at
hora local.
12:28
Por
local
favor.
time, please.
Obrigada.
Thank
E
you.
agora gostaríamos ainda de
And now I would like to show a second video, which was made available by Avabrum. Thank you. Those are images that are difficult to digest, and we are very much touched, and that's very shocking. I will introduce the people, our guests at the panel. They are Andresa Rodrigues, Bruno's mother, one of the victims of this crime and vice president of Avabrum. Welcome. Dom Vicente Ferreira, auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Belo Horizonte and member of the Commission for Integral Ecology of the National Conference of Bishops in Brazil. Danilo Chamas, a lawyer of human rights and coordinator of the Observatory of Criminal Proceedings of the Tragedy in Brumadinho. Welcome. Antônia Klein, lawyer and senior legal advisor of ECCHR. And Ben Van Pespatrata, senior legal advisor of ECCHR. And Marek Mizak, policy advisor on EU external affairs. Comece. I want to thank all of you for having accepted our invitation to be a member of the panel. Before I give the floor to Marek, there is a keynote speech which has to do with the structure of our event. In the first block, our guests will have a short introduction, and then I will ask questions to any of them, to all of them. And then the members, now the participants can use the Q&A tool for questions and answers. It's a switch you have at the bottom on the left-hand side. I ask you to, depending on the number of questions, we might not be able to address all of them. We have a limited time, so we might have to select some of the questions. For those who have just joined us, I want to remind you that the event can be followed either in Portuguese or in English, and for that you have to click on the globe at the bottom on the right-hand side, and then you choose the language. In order to not waste more time, Marek, you have the word. Thank you, Madalena. Dear.
The case of Brumadinho and its broader implications have been of great concern to the Church in Europe. On the first anniversary of this tragedy, Pope Francis expressed his solidarity with the victims and their families, and he issued a strong appeal for repairing and protecting our common home. Today, 3 years later, this call has still not been fully addressed. Brumadinho is not only a local problem, but it is a global problem. It is also not an isolated case, but unfortunately, it is one of many examples of an irresponsible corporate behavior, which is not unfrequently fueled directly or indirectly by European companies or investors. In order to prevent further tragedies like the one of Brumadinho from happening in the future, there is an urgent need for a mandatory European legislation that would require companies to conduct human rights and environmental due diligence in their global value chains, while offering the victims of corporate abuse an effective remedy. In view of the upcoming votes in the committees of the European Parliament that will take place next week, and also in the context of the ongoing trilogue negotiations, it is therefore of crucial importance that the proposal of the European Commission is not further weakened, but on the contrary, that it is strengthened in terms of its scope, in terms of the sectors and companies covered, but also with regard to the victims' access to justice and the enforceability of the obligations of the companies to avoid adverse environmental and human rights impacts of their actions. These are not just simple policy recommendations. These are an urgent plea of faith leaders, human rights defenders, indigenous people, and all that are affected by harmful corporate actions in Latin America and in the world. Thank you very much, and I wish us all a fruitful discussion.
Muito obrigada, Marek, pelas suas
Thank you
notas
very much,
introdutórias.
Marek, for your
E agora
introductory
vou
words.
passar a palavra
Now
para
the
Andresa.
floor will
Muito obrigada por
go
estar
to
aqui nesta
Andresa. Thank you for
entrevista.
being here
É
today,
um
Andresa.
orgulho grande recebê-la
It's
aqui
a
neste evento.
pleasure to have you here in our
Olá
event.
a todos e a
Good
todas.
afternoon to all of
Meu
you.
agradecimento, né?
I want to
Zero,
thank
a ESC,
to
a
ASC,
reconhece,
RECE,
pela oportunidade de partilhar
Miseror,
pouco do que nós
and other
desejamos,
organizations for the
né?
opportunity
Depois do dia 25 de
to
janeiro
share this
de
after
2019.
the 25th of January 2019. Things we have gone through a lot. I would like to say hello to the 272 gems that are present. Those 272 victims that have been murdered, cruelly murdered, and brutally murdered by Vale on the 25th of January 2019. I'm Andres Rodriguez. I'm Bruno's mother, my only son, that was murdered together with 271 gems in this crime tragedy that happened here in Brumadinho. The feeling that we have today, after years of impunity, after the collapse of the dam of Brumadinho, it's the feeling of pain, mourning, and sadness, and we're revolted. I think that justice, unlike what's popularly said, they say that justice is late and never fails. But I say it drags on and it fails. How many people have been incriminated by the tragedy, by this crime that has been in the making? Which company has been responsible for murdering Vale and Tuvisud that certified the dam? They're still working. They still have no problem with their company, and our family are still under this mud of blood of, and it's been 3 years that the criminal proceedings began. And after all this time, the Second Circuit of Judges in Brazil, they changed the jurisdiction after the defendants requested it. And so we are in a jurisdiction, we had a jurisdiction, and the defendants we had other crimes in our story, in our lives. So the jurisdiction for the proceedings should be with a federal court. And even after fighting a lot through the association, and we had opinions, we had reports, we had an exchange of emails that the mining agency knew that this dam would collapse. We have a lot of evidences of this crime. And despite all that, the jurisdiction has changed. The defendants could choose where they wanted the the process to run.
volte para a
And
instância
I
federal,
would like,
anulando os 3 anos de processo.
so
Então, assim, o que
after
nós estamos
going to the
vivenciando
federal
aqui no Brasil,
justice, the
né, em
3
Minas
previous
Gerais
years have
e em
been
Brumadinho,
rendered
é
now.
algo
So
cruel.
Minas Gerais, what happened in Brumadinho
Precisamos
is
órfãos da
terrifying.
justiça.
We
A
are
justiça que ela
orphans
está
by
cega,
the
surda
justice.
e muda.
It's
Não
blind, deaf,
atende
and
ao
unresponsive.
não
And
atende
it's
aquilo, né, que a
responding
que o
to the
réu
capital
solicitou.
by doing
E
what
esse
the
deserto
defendants
na
have
nova jurídica,
requested.
ele transforma a
This
justiça num lugar de injustiça.
judiciary
Então,
maneuver
esse
brings a lot of
trabalho que
injustice.
nós
And
familiares
this
fazemos aqui,
has what
no
our
território.
families are
Muito,
doing in our territory, in our
é muito triste
struggle. This is very sad.
você ser o prisioneiro
It's
do
like
crime
being
que foi
a
cometido por
prisoner
duas
of a
empresas
crime
e sermos os
that was
familiares,
committed
né,
by
os
2
moradores das
companies.
comunidades,
And
os
we, the
descendentes
family members,
dessa tragédia,
and
e os
we,
prisioneiros também.
the dwellers,
Porque o
we
que
are like
cometeu o crime
prisoners
segue
of this,
vivo, né,
because
com
those
seus
that committed
CNPJs.
their
E para
crimes, they
nós,
still can
aqui que vivemos
work
no
freely.
território,
And we,
para nós que
those of us
perdemos
living
aquilo
in the
que não se
territory,
repara
those that
é que
have
a vida,
lost things that
a
cannot
maquiagem ela segue.
become,
Ela
that
segue
can
porque a
be
mídia social
made
ela
good,
coloca assim, olha, a
the lives of
reparação está
those
sendo
people.
feita. Foi feito um acordo.
In
Um
the press,
acordo
you
que
hear that
ouviu os
an
familiares,
agreement has been made,
estamos numa
an
situação de
agreement that
adoecimento.
pay you
Nós
to
estamos numa
listen to the
situação
family members.
de
We are in a
desrespeito total.
situation of
Enquanto
total
isso, a
negligence,
mídia, ela
and the
propaga
media
através aí
spreads
da
the
empresa
word, and
mineradora,
through
da
this,
Vale,
the
que está sendo
Valley and the
reparado,
mining
que
agents,
está
that
sendo feito.
the
Mas, na verdade,
compensations are
somos
being
nós
made,
que
but
perdemos o
it's
que não
not.
se
No, we
repara
have
é que
lost,
vivemos num
we have
território
lost things, and
atingido
we are
pela lama de
living in
sangue
an
que
area
recebemos, né?
where
Nesse
this
caso,
mud of blood
passamos
is
no dia a
there.
dia.
We are
E as
neglected,
interferências,
and in our daily lives,
nós
we are
vivemos com um rio
facing a
hoje
lot
que
of
está
problems.
poluído,
Our
que é
river
impróprio para
is
banho, para
not
pesca,
proper
que
for
tem metais
bathing,
pesados, e aqui
for
eu acabo de
fishing,
anunciar
with
que tem
lots of
super bactérias
heavy irons,
presentes na água.
and
Então,
they
o
have
crime
also
não passou,
informed that
o
we have
crime não acabou.
bacteria
É um
in the
crime
area.
que
So
segue
this
sendo
crime,
continuado.
the effects of the crime they're still being felt.
O atestado de barragem,
The certification
quando
for this
a
dam,
Vale,
when Valley
emitiu esse atestado para
issued
continuar
this
minerando,
certification so that they would
Tudo que é a
continue with
empresa
the
alemã,
mining, TÜV
ela
Süd, this
veio
German
até aqui no
company,
campo para poder fazer
they
a
came
vistoria,
to
e ela
us to
comprovou que não
supervise,
tinha os
and
níveis
they
seguros
saw that the
para
levels
o
of
atestado.
safety were
No
not
entanto,
safe
a Vale
enough
arrumou uma
for
outra
the
forma de
certification.
cálculo
But
para
Valley
enviar,
changed
então,
the
nesse
form of
primeiro nível de
calculation so
segurança
that we
o
had
atestado.
a
Ou
number
seja,
which made it
a
possible
Vale
to issue the
comprou,
certification. So
TÜV
Valley
vendeu o
bought,
atestado da morte.
TÜV
E
Süd
assinado com uma
sold the
canetada,
certification
a
of death
canetada de
and
sangue e a
signed
canetada da lama.
with
O
ink made of
treinamento de
blood.
barragem que foi feito aqui não
This
tinha sirene,
there were
foi
no
feito por uma
sirens in the
mola de
training.
carnaval.
We
Quem
had
seguiu a rota
very
que foi a
improvised
Vale
things.
morreu.
Those that
Então, são
followed
coisas que
this
estão todas
path
comprovadas em aberto
died.
no processo da
Those
Polícia
evidence are
Federal,
proved in
aí
the federal police
nos autos que foram
investigations,
produzidos
also in the
pela
files that
CPI
were
da Câmara
produced by
Federal
the
e da
effective
Assembleia
finding
Legislativa.
commission of the
E ainda
camera of
assim,
the chambers of
a
the House of
justiça
Representatives,
daqui
and the
desconsidera até
justice
o momento
here
que
will
é
not
legítima.
consider that.
Nós
Today,
estamos na estaca zero
we're
de todo o
back to
processo de
zero
dor, do
in the
crime e da
process
revolta
of
que foi
pain,
causada nesse
crime,
território.
and
Né?
also
Enquanto
this
mãe, meu
revolt
coração
that we
bate
feel. As a
onde
mother,
meu filho está.
my
Hoje, o
heart
coração
beats where
dele
my
bate
son
onde eu sei.
is, and
É
his
isso
heart
que faz com que
beats
a
in
ABRU,
my
que é a associação que representa os
chest. And
familiares,
of Broom, that's the
faça a
association that
luta
represents the family.
para que
We're
todas as
struggling to have
pessoas que são
justice so that
responsáveis pelo
everybody
crime
who's
sejam
responsible for the
condenadas e paguem
crime,
pelo
they will
crime
be
que cometeu,
brought to justice
pela
for the
memória.
crimes they have committed,
Hoje nós
for the
temos um memorial
memories.
sendo erguido em
We have
Brumadinho, né? Já está
a
quase
memorial
pronto.
that's been
Ele
made,
foi erguido nos
it's
Córregos do
almost
Feijão.
ready.
No
It
entanto,
is
a
in the stream
narrativa
Feijão,
desse
but
memorial,
the
bem
narrative
como
of
a
this
governança,
memorial and the
se sobrevida
governance,
sobre os cuidados
they're
da
under
empresa que
the
os assassinou.
auspices of the
Então, por
companies
isso,
that
o
murder
memorial
them.
seria inaugurado no
That's
dia 25
for
de
this
janeiro
reason, this was meant
próximo.
to be
Não
opened
será,
on
porque
25th of
nós
January.
não aceitamos que o
It was
memorial
meant to be
seja
open, but we did not
governança e
accept it
muito
because
menos a narrativa da empresa que
we
assassinou
did
gente.
not
É
accept it
lugar de
because they
memória
represent
e
the
lugar também de
murderers. It's a
denúncia
place of
para que esse
memory
crime
and it's a
nunca mais se
place to
repita, para
denounce
que ninguém
so
passe a
that
dor
this
que
crime will
eu
never
e
be seen
271
again. So
famílias passam
me and
diariamente.
271 other families,
A não
we go
repetição
through
do
this on
crime,
a daily basis.
né? São
We
ações
and the
alternativas, né? Crime
non-repetition repetition of the crime
é que será
they're
capaz
changing
de
some,
mudar essa triste realidade.
just by changing the mineral acts,
Né?
we
Não
will
há
be able to change
reparação,
this. There
não
is
há
no
letos
compensation, no
superficiais,
reparation. There is
somente o
no,
ouro das três joias. Hoje,
uh,
nós seguimos com
we have
três
to
corpos
find
lavando
our
sangue.
gems. We have
Já são
three
quase
bodies,
4 anos
three
que os
bodies
familiares
in the
aguardam para
mud.
fazer a
And it's been
despedida
4
da Natalia
years
de
they want
Oliveira,
to
da
say
Maria de Lourdes e do
goodbye
Tiago
to
Tadeu.
Natalia
Nós
de
temos
Oliveira,
3
Maria
joias
de
ainda.
Lourdes, and
Sem
Tiago.
esse
We
encontro,
have 3
não existe
gems that
além.
still have to be
Sem
found. And
justiça,
without finding
não
them,
existe além.
there is no comfort. There is no
São
comfort.
várias
So
situações
there are
que nos
many
colocam
situations that
diariamente no dia
may
25 de
that will
janeiro de
make a face
2019.
us
Reparação
remember the
ou
25th
usagem,
of January
aí pela empresa assassina que é usada pelos
2019.
governos de Minas
This
Gerais,
reparation
para
is
nossa
made,
linguagem, essa
is used
palavra,
by
ela é
the
dividida em
government
3
of Minas
tipos.
Gerais
Só
and
assim
by
ela
the
traduz assim
murdering
para nós,
company.
que é
There
a
are
ré
3 things that represent. It's
para
the
e depois
defendant
o san,
should,
porque o ré
the
é a marcha ré do escape,
reparation.
ela paralisa a nossa
Ré in
vida no dia
Portuguese is when
25 de janeiro
you
de
go
2019.
backwards.
Nós seguimos
So
presos à lama de
so
sangue
we're still
por
attached to
todo o
this
acontecimento,
date
todo o
for
crime
all
e por
that happened, for
toda
the
a
crime,
tratativa ou
and
ausência
for the
dela
way the
nos causos.
proceedings are going on,
Isso
the
é
way
ainda mais
they're not
doloroso e
going. So
inoperante,
it's very
porque
painful
nós
because
temos
the
a
justice
certeza de
is
que
not working.
injustiça
We are
é o
sure that injustice
principal
is the
combustível
most
das mineradoras de
important
matarem.
fuel
Se não
for
houver
the
justiça,
mining agencies to keep on
matar em
killing.
nome do
If
lucro e
without
capital
justice, they will
vale
kill
muito
in
a
the
pena.
name of
Porque o que é cobrado
profit
dessas
and the capital.
mineradoras? É
What do
cobrado
we demand
multa.
from them?
Multa para
Well,
mineradora é
fines, they should be
diária.
fined, but
Ela paga a
fines,
multa e continua
it's
operando. Ela não paga a
peanuts.
multa, ela
They pay
mata
the fine, but they
e
keep on
paga essas
operating.
migalhas,
They
continua
kill, they
operando.
operate, they
Tem
pay
uma lei
peanuts,
de
and they keep on
extinção da
working.
barragem que é a Mar de Lamas e
There
Nunca
is
Mais,
a law
foram 3
to
anos para
decommission
extinguir a
another
barragem. Aí as empresas
bar,
mineradoras não
another dam.
fizeram. O
They
que
had
a
3
justiça
years to
fez?
decommission it, and they
Tempo
didn't
de
do it.
ação.
What
Eles
did the
pagam multa
justice
do
do?
governo de Minas,
They reached an
ganham o
agreement. They
contrato
pay a
e
fine to the government
no
of Minas
mês que vem
Gerais,
não tem mais prazo para recomissionar. Ficou livre.
with
Então
that
aqui
fine,
tudo
they
é
can
tratado
keep
assim,
on
olha, com as
doing
migalhas
the
que
mining
não
work.
chegam nos
So
territórios.
they are
O
dealing with
dinheiro não
peanuts. We never
volta
get
em
this.
benefício para a
The
população, em
money is
benefício para a
not
comunidade,
does
não
not
volta em
reach the
tratamento
population,
médico,
the
não
community,
volta
the
em
for
manutenção,
medical
né, em reconstrução do meio ambiente,
purposes, in the
em acesso
recovery
das
of the
pessoas,
uh,
né, em políticas públicas, em qualidade de vida.
environment.
Não,
We need
não
this
chega nos
money for
municípios.
public
E nós
policy
ficamos
and quality of life.
morosos,
It
nós
does not
ficamos com a
reach us.
tristeza, nós
We are left
ficamos com
with
a
our
revolta
pain,
e
with
com a
our
indignação.
sadness,
É isso que a gente tem.
indignation,
Todas
and
essas
that's what we
ações
have
nos
left. All
paralisam no
these
dia
actions,
25 de
they
janeiro de 2020.
paralyzes on the 25th of January
E, como forma
from 2019.
denunciar
And as a
toda
way
essa
to
ação nunca caia
denounce,
no
we do
esquecimento,
not
a
want
Amazônia
this to be
marcha todo
forgotten.
dia
Of
25, como
Vabrun,
dizer para
every
Brumadinho,
25th,
o ato em
there
honra
is an
das
act
272 joias,
to pay
as vítimas
respects
desse
for the
crime
victims of the
brutal de
crime,
Vale,
the 272
em
James, this brutal
época,
crime
tendo
of
como
Vale,
bandeira o
and we
encontro,
defend
a justiça e a
the
memória. Agora, nesse
encounter,
marco de
justice, and
4 anos,
memory.
nós vamos fazer no domingo,
And
dia
after 4
18, um
years,
pedal,
on
com
Sunday, we will have
272 pedalões, cada um
272
representando uma
people
joia. Nós
pedaling
vamos
and
fazer
representing, each one
seminares para
representing
discutir
a
os
gym.
impactos
We will have a
em
seminar
Brumadinho
to
e
discuss
regiões
the
atingidas, né, por
impacts in
esse crime.
Brumadinho, and the other
Nós
regions
faremos
for this crime.
a carreata por justiça no dia 24
We
de
will
janeiro
have
também.
we'll
E no
go
dia
take to the
25, então, o
streets
ato, né,
in the
de
evening on the
justiça, encontro e
25th
memória. E também
in
nós
the act of
participaremos da
justice,
missa,
encounter, memory.
né,
We will have a
pela
mass
ecologia integral,
for the
Carlinhos
integrative ecologists,
fará
which
todo
is
dia 25,
something that Ransard does
e
every
que será
25th.
realizado também agora, nesse
And
dia
this will be
24.
held again
Então é isso,
now.
agradecer, me colocar à
And I want to
disposição,
thank
né,
you
e dizer a
all,
todos e
and
todas que nos acompanham
for
que
all of
desistir não
you
é opção.
following me.
Aquilo que nós não
You
queremos
should
para
not give
nós,
up. What
nós
we
não
want for
queremos que
ourselves
aconteça
is
com
we
ninguém.
don't want it to
Nem em
happen to anyone
Brumadinho, nem no
else,
estado
not
de
in
Minas Gerais,
Brumadinho,
nem
not
no
in the state of
Brasil,
Minas Gerais,
nem no mundo.
not in
A
Brazil, and not
justiça
anywhere in
mundial,
the world. The word
tribunal, os
justice
legislativos,
and the
executivos e
legislation,
judiciários têm
executive
que
organs,
imergir
and
no ágil,
they have
abrir
to
os
be
olhos
they have to have the ability to
para
open
a
their
sua
eyes
vítima e não para o
to the
capitão.
victims and
Porque
not to
se
the
assim
capital,
for, infelizmente,
because
outros crimes repetirão.
otherwise
Devemos cumprir o
these crimes will
passado.
repeat
Então,
themselves
muito
within a short
obrigada.
space
E
of time. Thank you very
272
much.
joias
And
presentes e Bruno
272
presente.
gems are here, and Bruno's present too. Andressa, thank you very much for your words. I want to express our solidarity and our condolences for this pain you and the other mothers are going through. Thank you for contextualizing. This has been very important. It helps the participants. Maybe they do not know exactly what happened. And I think it was very good to hear your words. So the next, the word will go now to Dom Vicente, please. I'm very happy to be here with all of you, all these partner organizations. Listening to Andresa is always an opportunity, which is a very strong, because we relive the entire path. We've been together in the 4 years of struggle and mourning ever since the collapse of the dam in Brumadinho on the 25th of January, 2019. I'm happy for this live about a very important subject, impunity, crime, and it's going within the context of the fourth pilgrimage for integral ecology to Brumadinho. I'm Dom Vicente Ferreiro, the auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Belo Horizonte, from where I'm talking to you, and I follow the valley, the Paraupeba Valley, and Brumadinho is the headquarters, and that's a region episcopal, Nossa Senhora de Rosário. There are many points we want to highlight here, but right now I want to thank the organizations present in this live. We have many others that help us form a great chain for the memories of the 272 gems that were killed in the Valley crime. And we're seeking justice, and we're trying to bring justice in the integral ecology. We are all looking at, together we're fighting. I'm very glad to be here of the Causa Comum, and I'm looking forward to the debate that will come. Thank you very much.
Dom Vicente, muito obrigada.
Dom Vicente, thank you very much for your words.
Importante companheiro.
You are a very important partner in all those years, and it's a pleasure to have you here in this event. The next guest will be Danilo Chamas, please.
Por favor, abra o microfone, Danilo.
Danilo, please unmute. Hello to all of you. Here, I would like to thank you for the invitation to be a member to part of this discussion. I'm also a dweller of Brumadinho. I'm at the community of Jangadas, a few kilometers where this tragedy took place. And I'm very proud and I'm honored to be part of this, of the Rancer team, and to be able to work with Vabrum, Misero, ECCHR, to have this criminal justice made so that those who are responsible for this tragedy, for the homicides, will be brought into justice. And that's why we have created, and we have this observatory of the penal actions for the tragedy in Brumadinho that supervises the proceedings in Brazil and also in Germany. We have seen that the the mining of ores is, we have a global chain. There are many players in other countries in Europe and in other places in the world. And that's why we are here together. We here with several organizations, Miserior, ECCHR, they're trying to change the legislation in Europe in order to be able to address this issue and give them more responsibility during the proceedings. I hope that we can deepen during this event these issues. Thank you very much, and big hello to all of you.
Também você,
To you as well,
muito
Danilo,
obrigada.
thank you very
Também o
much.
seu papel tem sido
Your role
fundamental,
has
uma vez que
been
você acompanha o
of
caso
utmost
de uma
importance. You've
perspectiva
been,
jurídica, que é
from
mais
the
essencial.
legal point
Obrigada.
of view, you've been
E agora
following this
iremos passar a
process.
palavra
And now
aos
the
nossos
floor
convidados,
will go to our
europeus, e vamos
European
começar pela
guests.
Antônia.
And Antonia
Obrigada.
will be our first. Antonia, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Madalena. I'm seeing that my pictures just struck, so just give me a sign and I would take off my camera if it doesn't work. But yes, maybe I say a couple of words why we are also dealing with this case in Germany. And it was already mentioned that only 4 months before the dam broke, TÜV Süd Brazil issued a stability certificate certifying that the dam was stable. And then, or now, TÜV Süd Brazil is suspected to have known, as was already said, that there were, in fact, severe defects in the dam, and that they allegedly still issued that stability certificate in order to secure further business relationship with Vale, and that through this issuance of the stability certificate, in the end, they undermined that the necessary measures by Vale or by the Brazilian authorities were taking in order to protect the people of Brumadinho and the environment. So what is the connection to Germany? TÜV Süd Brazil is a subsidiary of the German TÜV Süd AG. And there are witness testimonies that suggest that there are German TÜV Süd employees that had knowledge of everything what has happened in Brazil prior to the issuance of the stability certificate. And also from the structure of the TÜV Süd group, it seems that TÜV Süd employees in Germany had the competence and also the responsibility to monitor the technical operations in Brazil, and also that they had the oversight of compliance, including corruption. So this is why, together with 5 relatives who have lost people who were killed through the dam break, we have filed with the ECCHR and Miseria a criminal complaint to the German prosecutor, asking the German prosecutor to thoroughly investigate which role the German TÜV Süd AG played in all this, and also to to see in how far they were involved here and how far they maybe controlled the business that was going on in Brazil. Maybe the concrete crimes that we asked to be investigated is the killing of 272 persons by negligence, negligently causing of a flood, and giving a bribe in business practice. And what is important is, maybe as a last point, that these crimes relate to acts or omissions by TÜV Süd employees as individuals and not against the company, because we don't have a corporate criminal law in Germany. So against the company, it's only possible, and that's what we're also asking for, to investigate administrative offense. And where are we at the moment? We're basically waiting for a decision by the prosecutor. So she's still investigating, and decision can be either that if she sees that there's enough evidence, files an indictment, then the case would go in front of the German courts, or that she closes the case if she considers that there's not enough evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonia, for what you've said. These legal aspects are very complex, and it's always challenging for us, these issues. And you from Germany and Danilo in Brazil are 2 key elements to us, so to help us understand this case from a legal point of view. Now to our last, to finish this conversation, Ben, you're welcome. You have the floor.
Muy obrigado e bom dia.
Thank
I'll
you,
speak in English.
And good morning.
So thanks for organizing. So the different organizations, as well as my colleagues at ECCHR. It's very important to have these events, both locally as well as internationally, through the modern technology, because it's very important to visualize and remember cases such as the Brumadinho dam collapse, because it makes very clear that that there are holes in the legal framework, both in terms of obliging companies such as Vale, such as TÜV, such as companies that are doing similar things, that they need to proactively prevent crimes like what happened in Brumadinho, because what is also clear is that this is a crime, or this facts could have been totally preventable. So it's very important that we clarify legally in laws that companies have an obligation to prevent crimes such as this. And at the same time, it's also very clear that companies need to be held accountable when these incidences occur. And so my colleague Antonia has already mentioned the criminal complaint in Germany vis-a-vis TÜV, but that doesn't mean that there should be other and maybe additional routes for accountability and access to justice being created and opened. And that is exactly the process that is currently ongoing in a number of member states. In France, you have a loi sur la vigilance. In Germany, you have the Lieferkeit- und Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz. And at the European level, we're now legislating that corporate sustainable due diligence directive, where Marek has already alluded to. And at the UN, we're also trying to get the legally binding instrument. So it's very important that we start developing and legislating these laws. So looking then specifically at the corporate sustainable due diligence directive, it would not necessarily talk about a company like Vale, given that that's a Brazilian company operating in Brazil, but it does help us to look at actors such as TÜV and also potential financial investors into Vale. But what is maybe even more important is that what happened, and if we zoom in actually specifically at TÜV, so a company that is hired by another company to inspect and to do a very bad job at actually inspecting, identifying risks that then can transform into genuine impacts. It's very important to highlight that this is not sole instances, but that actually there's a lot of companies like TÜV performing these services to other companies. And that when we legislate a corporate sustainable due diligence directive, namely a European law that helps to oblige companies to look at their risks and to address them, and to look at their impacts and address them, that often these companies will look and will contract services like TÜV Süd and other auditors and certification bodies in their quest of meeting that obligation. So it's very important that when the legislators, and Marek has again referred to it, that Parliament is now thinking about an opinion about its position, and that the member states have already formed a position, that we also make sure that that law is correct in qualifying the potential contributions of auditors such as TÜV Süd, so that we are not generating more business, but that we instead, if companies want to outsource their business to companies like TÜV Süd, that there is much more emphasis on also accountability and quality control for TÜV Süd. So I think that's the big lesson that we can take home and should remember whenever we talk about the Brumadinho case. I'll leave it at that so that we also still have enough time for debate with the audience. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada, Ben.
Thank you very much, Ben. And then we have a few specific questions that can be raised. There are a few people at the panel, and also the audience can have the opportunity to ask questions. I would like to ask to start with Andressa. My question is, the crime of Vale and Tuve Sud has multiple facets. The affected do not only suffer from the painful loss of the loved ones, but also face a lot of destabilization of social cohesion, the contamination of air, soil, and water, and the permanent fear that a new tragedy could occur. From what source does Avabrum draw strength for their struggle? And what would have to happen for you to consider the association's mission accomplished? Please unmute. The crime of Vale and Tuve Sud, they leave marks that cannot be erased. The first one is they took our loved ones away. Our loved ones that were burned, that were buried alive, that were taken to a butcher. They knew that the stability of the dam was not good. Both knew, and yet they were allowed to stay. So we have a lot of facets in this of this crime. We have environmental problems, public health problems. Also, there is a movement in the city that's unbearable. The word reparation, which is being used, it is in truth a sequence of the crimes that have been committed in the territory. And this is our truth in our context. Avabrum draws its force, its strength from God. Without God, we wouldn't have anything. That's our pillar. The second pillar is the love for the 272 victims that were murdered, buried alive in the mud of blood by Vale and Tuve. So our strength comes with this commitment we have towards each one of them from our partners. Alone, we would not go very far. Being able to denounce this and this strengthens us together with our partners. This health, this not being left on your own, this strengthens us, and we seek and we can get the energy we need, the force we need to go ahead. What has to happen to consider it accomplished, our mission? First, we have to find the three James, Maria de Lourdes, Natália Porto, and Tiago Tadeu. If we do not find them, if they're not back to their families, if we don't have the corpses to be able to say goodbye, to say farewell, our mission will not have been accomplished. The second one is the criminal condemnation. It has to be exemplary. Just as big as the crime was, to the same proportion, they killed our people with cruelty. They must land in jail. It's 272 crimes. And this has to be taken into consideration. The responsibility has to be as big as the crime they have committed. The real reparation from our viewpoints for the family, and not something that's dealt behind closed doors where we families, we city dwellers, we do not have access to the agreements, so we have no idea. We cannot tell them what has to be made in the city for the family, for the city. This is money from our blood and from our tears. If Vale had not killed with the support of Tuve Sud, they wouldn't have the money for available. So the actions have to be reflected to us. So every action that comes from this blood money has to come towards us. And the memory, what memory loves stays alive and remains alive within us. So the memorial has, it needs the governance of the family members and the narrative. It cannot become a museum, it's a memorial that has to be able to faithfully tell the story of what they went through on the 25th of January, 2019. And they didn't have a single minute to run away. That's the time it took to kill them. So we have to take the blindfolds from our eyes, the justice. So it's been 4 years without any people being held responsible. And because there was a change of the jurisdiction, things went back to zero because they have heard the defendants, and every single thing we've done so far has been brought to the beginning. So these are the starting point. And we have to have more strict mineral acts. The acts cannot be in favor of the mining companies. And that's what we have in Brazil, the mining acts, the laws, and they help these exploratory exploitation and causes murders. Thank you, Andresa, for your personal perspective. I would like to ask Dom Vicente a question. He's been affected by the crime. You were a bishop of the Archdiocese of Belo Horizonte before the tragedy. I would like to ask you, what has changed on your daily life after the collapse of the dam? How did that affect your life? Madalena, first of all, when we hear Andresa, Bruno's mother, saying we feel addressed in every single aspect of our life, I would like to answer this question personally. I want to say what happens to me ever since this day, 25th of January, 2019. I came to the Archdiocese of Belo Horizonte. I was ordained bishop in May 2017. I've been sent to the Valley of Paraupeba. I already had about 2 years of work there. And ever since this crime, I think that I've become converted, ecologically converted. It was the impact, it has impacted me a lot, my body and what I say. Madalena, I rarely hear someone asking me this question. So, Dom Vicente, how about you? How has it affected you, this crime? I rarely hear this question. It's one of the few times perhaps that this question has been asked, because usually we are in the struggling, it's the bishop, it's the leading person, but very few people ask, how has he been affected? I would like to take this opportunity to tell you how much this has changed my life, in my body and in the narrative. From the moment I saw myself with the families and the community and the church and the society in the perspective of a crime that changes the entire social and ecological structure. It's a crime that will destroy the social tissue, not only Brumadinho, but in the basin of Paraupeba. I had a light inside of me, this glowing light. I was made aware our societal style cannot go on like that. We have to change. And that's when you have the conversion, because I cannot anymore not to give a testimony about this crime wherever I go. You know, as human aspects, affective, spiritual aspects, I can say, I can wrap up by saying this crime has broken the structure in a new human structure. And psychoanalysis calls it trauma. When we have to redo our entire life after a trauma, this is a trauma. So I think this is a never-ending thing. This trauma leaves the wounds open. I would like to tell you, Madalena and dear listener, if the mud was heavy, and it's heavy, this mud that turns inside us with the memories, with the affections of those that died, of the struggles, disputes, of the current situation, as Andressa put it, is very complex, violent, because of the mining, the modus operandi of the mining companies in our territory, in our land. We've distracted about terrorism. I think sometimes mining companies are terrorists. They come to our land and they bring about a lot of violence. So it has changed my life a lot. I would like to say that there is a suffering that sometimes it's unbearable, unbearable. And as it has been said, we need support, we need a network. So it generates persecution, it generates libel cases as people see it. So it also generates lives in our hearts because we want to change this reality. I belong to several organizations, the Commission of Integral Commission, the several networks of mining, Nossa Senhora do Rosário, the remuneration. I feel the presence of a broom and the other social movements. This has changed my life. The church, where I'm a priest, I'm a bishop, I'm also a citizen, that I worry about everything that affects our human lives and the planet. Wherever there is an aggression to life, it touches me, I study and I write about it. If anyone wants to see what has how this has impacted my life and my religious in my life, you can read our interviews and write is from the 25th of January 2019. That's all I do: poetry, music, dialogues, and my writings. Brumadinho plays a role. Vicente, thank you very much for sharing this dimension, this personal dimension with us, and not on a political and also cultural. It's a very important factor because we all of us working with such issues, we are personally affected and we are moved by it. It's not a work, it's a mission. Thank you very much for recommending some of the readings, and anyone who's interested could find more information in the sites of Rainser and Data Avabrum. I would like to ask Danilo Chamas a question. Danilo, in your work, Rainser uses the word reparation, integral into reparation. It's something that not everybody might understand. What criteria must be met for reparation to be considered integral? Another question is, when you talk about the criminal process in Brazil, Andressa in her speech said there is a lack of responsibilization, criminal responsibilization. Do you think you could give us some more details on the issue? Thank you, Madalena. These are very important questions. I hope I can answer them. Reparation to us is a word with has many meanings. It has to do with damage, and it involves the economy and economy symbolic and moral clinic dimensions. It's not only to consider a judicial act by other authorities and not an individual act. We have on our daily life, we have a reference, the concept of integral reparation of the jurisprudence of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. And according to this concept, reparation must go far beyond this compensation and money. And the billionaire agreement between Minas Gerais and the justice entities and the mining agencies, it's not sufficient, and it's very bad. I'm also a part of the Institute Cordillera, and we denounce what many have called an industry of reparation, which is where a lot of players, they become rich, where the local population are still suffering from this damage day after day. We talk about the terrorism of dams. This affects a lot of communities in Minas Gerais. I have to honor the people that the environmentalists defend, and those that fight for the human rights. They're fighting the mineral projects in Brumadinho, Brazil, and Latin America, and they're being stigmatized. The reparation process needs to include other dimensions, such as truth, memory, justice, and the guarantees of non-repetition. After Vabrum denounced which was mentioned by Andresa when she talked about the memorial, I asked, is it possible that one of the Holocaust museums in the world were administered by those that have Nazi ideals? The family members of the victims in Brumadinho, they tell me, without justice, without punishing those that caused the tragedy, there is no reparation. And after 4 years, despite very consistent evidence of the crimes committed, nobody has been punished in Brazil. The criminal case against 16 individuals, 11 employees by Vale and 5 of Tube Sud, was invalidated in December of last year by the Second Circuit of the Federal Supreme Court, which considered that the lawsuit was being made in an incorrect jurisdiction. The day before yesterday, the magistrate Rosa Weber, the president of our Supreme Court, determined the immediate fulfillment of this decision, sending the files to the federal court in Belo Horizonte. It's now up to the federal prosecutor's office to bring up new charges. And we hope that the prosecutors will take the opportunity to include all the 19 individuals that the federal police found guilty, and all the crimes that the investigation found had been committed, of murder and the other crimes. We also hope that the federal court treat this as a priority and allocates the human and financial resources needed for the proceedings to go on smoothly, with extra attention paid to the procedural maneuvers that could take into further delay the progress of the proceedings, from the extermination of the indigenous peoples to slavery, torture, and the forced disappearance of our last dictatorship, and the recurring crimes of ecocide and mining. Brazil's history is marked by impunity. We need to overcome this once and for all. Like in Argentina in 1985, in the words of the prosecutor who accused the dictator Jorge Videla, a descent into the dark places of the human soul, where misery and horror register depths that are difficult to imagine before and to understand afterwards. There is a need to delve into the monstrosity, an unpleasant examination of the many faces of the violence. But it's an absolutely necessary examination, for its very atrocity makes monstrous the mere hypothesis of impunity. For far too long, our apparent tranquility in Brazil was based on a false national conciliation, on the idea that a peaceful future will depend on our ignorance, our apathy, and our disinterest. Now, this can no longer be so. As the Argentine prosecutor said, it's our responsibility to found a peace based not on forgetfulness, but on memory, not on violence, but on justice. This is our opportunity, a chance, and perhaps it's our last. Gentlemen judges, never again, and thank you very much. Danilo, thank you very much for your what you've said and repeating the most recent, for giving us an update on the events. It's been a very perspective from Brazil, and now it would be interesting to have the perspective in Germany. And the floor goes to Antonia. Will ask her, Antonia, it has been more than 3 years since the criminal complaint was filed with the Munich Public Prosecutor's Office. Why? I would like to know why this process is so lengthy. Why has no answer been given? And it's also interesting to hear your perspective, why it's important that this case is properly investigated in Germany and not only in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, I think, at least to me, Andressa, you brought it very close, what it means for those who actually lost their loved ones through the dam break, to wait so long for justice. And also, Dom Vicente, you reported of your own experiences and your very personal experiences. And I can only imagine that this is not satisfactory, that you have to wait so long. And also that the uncertainty that it brings about, having to wait, is just unbearable. And without having had access to the files, it's difficult to already say what concretely is taking so long, but it is possible to make some assumptions on what poses obstacles, at least to these proceedings. And one is with regard to Germany, that the dam break happened in Brazil. So the most important, or maybe not the most, but most of the evidence really is in Brazil. So the German prosecutor cannot just go there and get the evidence, but they have to go through something which is called mutual legal assistance, which is known as a generally very bureaucratic and lengthy process in itself. And then once the evidence is here, they have to translate all this. And I think the files are huge coming from Brazil. So, so all this needs to be translated. And then, of course, it's also a very complex material. So all the technical details, also the prosecutor has to get aware with or to understand what has been happening. They have to understand how the mining works in Brazil and the whole mining security system, and then take a decision on this basis. And something else that we have observed is, and I think it's important to also speak about that, is that multinationals, as TÜV Süd is, are usually set up in a way that it's not transparent at all for the outside to see what their internal structures are and how also responsibilities are allocated within the company. Which also leads to obstacles on the side of investigation, understanding who exactly, what individual in the end bears the responsibility, for example, for a specific crime. And yes, apart from that, why is it important that this case is really also investigated in Germany? Ben has mentioned earlier that in recent years, we have seen that phenomenon that certifications are being sold in order to, or promising to ensure more safety to people and to the environment, but instead they also often lead to delusion of responsibility. And this has also been said already, there has not been any justice. No one has assumed responsibility, not the Brazilian authorities that actually outsourced the examination of the dams and the security, not Vale. They can defend themselves by saying, well, we commissioned the certification of the dam to a very renowned certifier, and TÜV Süd say, well, it's still the responsibility which is with Vale. And I think this case shows that outsourcing security that concerns human rights to private certifiers is highly problematic. And only thinking about it, private certifiers, they are operating in order to earn money and to make profit. And of course, they also have to assert themselves against competition of the market. So if we accept that certifiers are involved to some extent in certifying or examining safety, for example, of dams, then we at least have to demand, and this should already be questioned, of course, but then we at least have to demand, as Ben has also already done earlier, that the state must have legal and practical means to exert control over the certifiers, but also that those affected have effective access to justice.
Antonia, thank you very much. Your information has helped a lot to understand the factors that impact the proceedings, and this generates a lot of expectations on both sides of the pond. And it's very good to hear your comments and to shed some lights to the very intransparent process, and a lot of questions are left unanswered for those that have been affected. Thank you very much, Antonia. And now it's my last question. Ben, I'll ask you the question. In several European countries that are bills or laws already in place to ensure due diligence in the corporate supply chains, that are also processes underway in the European Union and the United Nations. What is the status of these negotiations, and how do the processes differ from one another? And my one other question, how do you think that these processes could positively impact on the countries that export raw material?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, because that's indeed a crucial question. At the EU level, also as we already mentioned in the beginning, we're really in the last stretch of agreeing on a directive. So that would make that in all EU member states, you have at least the same level of minimum rules. So as I was saying, in these days, and actually next week, there's going to be a set of votes in the European Parliament. And we hope by May of this year that the European Parliament as a whole will have like a set position on how it sees the legislation upcoming. And again, one of those key questions, which will probably be a key question until the last minute, is again, what is the role of certifiers? Should they take a big role or not role? Can they be held accountable or not? How far can companies actually rely upon that? So that triangle of irresponsibility that Antonia also referred to is going to be one of those questions until the end. That's the Parliament, but in the European Union, the Parliament doesn't have the final say. Once it has its opinion, it actually goes and negotiates with the governments of all the member states. And so that process is expected to land, well, nobody really knows, but it could be the end of this year, it could be maybe next year, but it's probably going to happen in sort of the next 1.5 years. Then, of course, we need to wait a bit until implementation, but at least in Europe, you would have like a uniform legislative approach to obliging companies to prevent such harm and to provide access to justice, as well as whatever is going to be the final role for these sort of certifiers. At the UN level, the legally binding instrument, the treaty, looks at it much more comprehensively, but that process is going to be a bit slower. We're already having this process for almost a decade. I think lots of progress has been made. We see lots of engaged states, even the US recently started negotiating, but there the problem is that the big entity missing in action is really the European Union. So that's really a hole in the negotiation process. So we really hope that the European Union also this year decides to fully engage into that process, and that in the next years we can also come with a legally binding instrument, a treaty at the UN level that would come up with similar minimum rules across all the UN member states. So not only European Union, but also Brazil or India or Angola, you name it, they could all accede to the same rules. However, the treaty is maybe in that sense even more important because it does not only deal with human rights due diligence, so the prevention and the dealing with actual risks and impacts, but it also deals with access to justice, but also, for example, that mutual legal assistance that Antonia was saying that is maybe not so sexy and attractive, but crucial whenever you deal with transnational cases or whenever you have transnational responsibility. So even anything that can happen on facilitating that would make the process of access of justice much more quicker. And so in that sense, the UN treaty is underestimated in what it can potentially deliver in terms of a more speedy access to justice. And I think in that sense, it also really would help companies that, for example, produce raw materials, export raw materials, where some of these impacts happen, would also help there to enable an access of justice, even if the proceedings are not necessarily happening in the same courts. Thank you very much.
Ben, thank you very much for your answer. And you brought this international dimension of due diligence, and it's extremely important. Unfortunately, the other sessions are too late for the population of Brumadinho, but maybe they might help prevent such crimes in the future. Then I would like to thank each one of you for your inputs, and it's been a very interesting discussion so far. So it's 6:15 in Germany, PM. So it would be important to ask, to hear some of the questions asked in the chat. We will probably not be able to address all the questions because, but we will be able to select some of the questions because of the time. So we hope this brings some more clarity to any questions you might still have. First of all, I would like to address the comments in the chat about the indigenous population. They have a very bad environmental crisis and also health, and they've been affected a lot. I invite you to read the comments in the chats, Meri Puri and Haroldo Heleno. And I also can read a question by Carolina Moura. It's a question to Antonia Klein. She asks if TÜV Süd is standing in the way of this investigation of the persecutors in Brazil, and if they know that the defense of the defendants are trying to use legal actions to hinder the development of the proceedings. So in Munich. So is there also are there such maneuvers here as well? Carolina also asks from Brumadinho if there is anything you can do to show the prosecutor office in Munich how important the justice in the justice proceedings in Germany is important to us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think I would just start. So first of all, we are still in the investigative phase in Germany. So we are only dealing with the prosecutor, and there the prosecutor has decided, which she can do by law, that until now there is no access to files. So neither the defense nor the joint plaintiffs, so those the family members of those that have been killed know what has actually been done during the investigations. So we also don't know what the defense has submitted there. But at the same time, this makes it difficult at that point and at this point in time to be very targeted in the defense. But once there's access to files, and when it even comes to court proceedings, of course, there is the opportunity for the defense to file submissions and to ask questions, which is very common that, for example, defense lawyers try to bother witnesses from the other side so that they become a bit insecure in their testimony. But this has not happened yet. Until now, it's really not been possible because everything is too vague for everyone except for the prosecutor, I would say. But this can change during court proceedings, and then the law is quite generous, I would say, with the defense. The defense has many rights in order to uphold the justice rights for the defense also, but we don't know yet. And I think so far there have been activities trying to make clear to the prosecutor what it means for those affected. And I just know from myself, but also from other lawyers representing relatives of people who have lost their loved ones, that we are really trying to make clear what this means. But of course we can't, for example, force them to participate in one of these events. Of course, this would be the best, I think, for them to be able to hear right from the people who are affected what all this means. This will happen on court, though, then, if it comes to court proceedings, which we don't know, unfortunately.
Thank you for clarifying, Antonia. I would like to have a question to Danilo. This was also mentioned in the chat. The question is, it comes from Margaret Bachenfeld. She asks if you could elaborate further on the work of the observatory, information about cases, legal mechanisms that are being followed, and if the work is available to the public in a website reports. It would be good to have an overview of the judicial proceedings, the legal proceedings, and the mechanisms that have been used to address the crime. Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. A tragedy as grave as this, a huge violation of the human rights, they have repercussions in the judiciary system in several aspects, in the civil aspects and the labor justice. Most of them were laborers and other jurisdictions in Brazil, and there have been demands that were started by investors that have felt lied to by the mining agency. Our observatory focuses on the criminal demands, legal demands, and it's the result of requests by the populations, especially by the victims, by the family of the victims, that tell us about holding people accountable, legally accountable, and for this. So we are focusing our work on the supervision of the proceedings in Brazil. We have commented this in a few minutes ago, have talked about this, and also the investigations that are going on in Germany. They have been addressed by Antonia Klei. The observatory focuses both criminal proceedings, and we hope that we can develop it further so that in a near future we can share with you what we have analyzed and share with the public and this is our share with them what we have seen in our analysis. This is important for the next stage. We are now focusing on the we're following the proceedings, and we want to share this. We want to divulge this to the population and to the victims, the family of the victims. We want the audience in Brazil to be able to, or people in Brazil to access these reflections we have made. Thank you for asking that question. We are here more than helpful to continue this dialogue. Thank you, Danilo. The next question will be addressed to Andressa. It was asked by Constantine. How does Vale contact people and the families that have been affected? And how does your work support the daily lives of those that have been affected? And come Ava Brum and the communities are being involved in the process, in the process of construction of this memorial. Thank you for the question. It's related to the contact of being contacted by Vale, the family members, since the 25th of January. They have not contacted us. We have found out about the burst of the dam, about everything that happened, of this killing, of the murderous killing through our TV. So it was hard to leave, to have a clear mind, so to look for informations. Now, after the founding of this association, we have access to the reparation team of Vale, but this is a very slow process. We have a lot of hurdles along the way every day. And how is work done by Vale towards the community? Ava Brum has three pillars. We seek justice. We want to find all the gems, and we want the gems, and we want to find the memory. And we have to fight for this crime to never happen again. It's focused on the survivors and the family members. The activities we have for the community is more like, we don't want this to repeat again. We want changes in the legal, in the laws. We have 63 dams at risk, and some of them, 3 of them are in a very, they're about to explode. They're very, very bad. And we want this crime to never, ever happen again. Those are the 3 fronts. I forgot the last question. Maybe you can repeat. The last question was about the building of this memorial, how you are being involved and how your opinions are being taken into consideration. What is the role, your role in the construction of this memorial? Ava Brum was the associate that reivindicated this memorial. It was a request by the association, by the family members. Up until then, we, with the family members, we chose the architecture, we chose the site for the memorial. So far, the association has a direct involvement in all actions of this memorial. But the issue we have at the moment is the governance, and because of the narrative behind it, because the narrative of the memorial will be made by those that are responsible for the governance. And this is where our opinions do not converge. The family members do not accept that Vale be responsible for the governance and is responsible for the narrative of this memorial. This is where we stand at the moment. And we get together, we meet representatives of the company and the Justice Department personnel to have our voice heard. But Vale wants to have a leading role in the memorial. Okay, and we do not accept it. All they have to do is pay for it, because it's because of them that we are suffering, and this is something that does not go back. Thank you, Andressa, for making it clear and vividly clear to us. Focusing still on the memorial, that's a question to Don Vicente, was asked by Rosângela, and she asked, the memorial in Brumadinho has a fundamental element. It's a local for memory. It's a site for memory. As someone, as a teaching, I would like to, and with a very close contact with the victims. And I think the architecture, they reinforce the crime scene. I think it's aggressive to the family members. How do you see this? How do you see this? This whole effect, the whole situation as a defender of the human rights of Abrum and the family members that have been contacted and heard in terms of the architecture, but it would be interesting to hear your opinion about the question asked. First of all, Rosângela, we completely agreed with what Andressa has just said. Those that are responsible for the governance of the memorial will have the narrative. We're radically against Vale holding this governance for this memorial. It has to be a site where the narrative of the victims, of those that have been affected, the families and the communities that have been affected. And as in relation to the memorial, we know that many realities in life, countries that have had dictatorships behind them. A memorial, Andressa, can also be a space to erase the memory. There is some memorial already there. And what we believe is this memorial has to be a living memory, updated and retold. And that's why in our pilgrimage, we always tell them the first pillar is the memory. And that's Ava Brum says, it's memory, because it's not a punctual memory. It's a memory that goes across the time in the culture of the ancestors. It's the rights that our violated dead have here. We cannot move on without respecting their rights. And that's why the space for this memory is important. And we have a faith-based perspective. So this memory touches the heart of God, which is the eternal memory. That's why he gives us this little capacity of memory. Those that live in our memories, they do not die. Those that love, they have eternal memories. And the space must translate this, the feelings, the strength of those that have been affected, and why the victims have died. This must be addressed. So in the former question of Madalena, when you said, what has changed in my life? I have worked under this perspective, this Christian memory is a sign of resurrection. There is no Easter if there is no peace, if the victims are not involved. If the memorial is there to forget the victims or to forget what happened, that's a different crime. Nobody can silence the memories of the victims. Nobody. And that's what we do in the perspective of faith. The resurrection, the Paschal memory only happens when we touch the wounds. Why did he die? Where, Andressa, where is all this written in voices, images, sound in the memorial that's being built? Otherwise, it can also be the aspect of the building, of the architecture might be pleasant, but it won't convey to the families, to the communities of the victims, what they feel. It will not convey what they feel. I'm talking about the perspective of other countries that lead with memorials. It's not an easy situation. That's why I tell you, it has to be an updated memory. And to close, I would like to say, Madalena, in this crime, in the extension of what happened in Brumadinho, what does not live in the memory will be transformed into diseases of our bodies, of our communities, and the victims of the families of the victims, or diseases that will affect the social and the environmental situation. What is not based on symbolic art, poetry, will fall on our bodies for the mourning we did not have, and also for the ways that will affect. It will be real on our environment that will be destroyed. It's Easter. It's liberating. We want this to never happen again, with a different way. We want the resurrection to happen. That's what I've thought about. This is a very deep question. It's not only the architecture or aesthetics, it comes from the depth of our soul. It's not only it's an external reproduction of something that will be told. This is where memories lie. It's a place that will help us maintain a permanent memory of what happened. Thank you, Dom Vicente. I think this perspective is also important because oftentimes we focus on the legal and political issues, and they are very important dimensions, but the memory also is a key aspect, a key factor. It was very important to have this, to have touched upon this. Unfortunately, our time is up. It's already 4 minutes after the hour, after 6:30 in Germany. I would like to ask Ben the last question to know what the situation with the Ukrainian war is. What is it like in Europe? It might bring impacts to not only Europe, but Brazil and other countries that export raw materials. I would like to ask you this question. I hope you can be very brief. You have a minute to briefly say what you think about that. The concrete question is, if you think that the importation of raw materials from Russia will alter the search of precious metals in other regions, like the iron ore in Brazil, do you see that as a realistic trend, or that's not the case?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I think Europe is a bit at a crossroads on that, because indeed, as you say, let's say a couple of years ago, thought that the world was quite peaceful with steady supply sources of raw materials, etc. Whereas now it currently sees commercial partners like Russia enter into war. It has friends or allies, as the US are doing also a trade war with China. So the world is a much more multipolar place. And that's at the same time that the European Union want to transition to a low carbon economy, and so indeed need specific critical raw materials very badly. So it is really trying to get new trade agreements with, for example, India, Indonesia, Mercosur, etc. And the question is indeed whether or not it will equally then be able to do that with high standards, including, for example, the corporate responsibility that we've been discussing. How does that arbitrate is certainly something that some of the skeptical voices of the due diligence legislation and corporate accountability legislation are mobilizing. I think there's a good chance that we will have strong legislation on corporate accountability despite this increased search for raw materials globally. Yeah, fingers crossed. And also when we work together, I think it's still a realistic scope to get strong corporate accountability laws, despite that sort of reconfigured search for raw materials.
Muito obrigada pela tua resposta, Ben. Então, chegamos mesmo ao final do nosso evento.
Thank you for your answers. We have come to the end of our event. Thank you very much to our guests. It was a pleasure to have you here and that you brought all those that information, which is very updated about the situation. I hope it has been very informative to all participants, and I hope that we have raised the awareness for those that have global supply chains, that they should be held, they should be more responsible. If you are in Brazil, you could participate in the activities next week in Brumadinho and Belo Horizonte for the 4th anniversary of this crime. You can look up the websites of Avabrum and Renzer. This event is being recorded and it might be available at a later time. And we could continue with some links and some sharing information if you want to have more information. I would like to thank our interpreters that have helped us with the simultaneous interpretation. And to close, I would give the floor to Andresa for the final words. I would like to thank all of you for having watched us, and also want to thank you for having us here. Camilo Chamas, who with the Penal Observatory have helped us a lot. We are continuing this. One day, somebody told me, where we cannot go in, we will not go in. But if we're invited to see the crimes, and if we can point the causes and the consequences of their actions, this is something which is very important. We know that we are here, we respect our dead, and we fight for justice and for the memory. And I want to congratulate you for this live event. It has clarified lots of points. We have to hold our hands and stay together and fight together, because without this, it's hard. And thank you very much. If you want to follow the social networks, you can see the calendar, our timetable, and you can see everything. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andresa, for your testimony, and to all of you, and hope to see you soon.